Before we begin tonight's story, take a deep breath. Let the noise of the world fade for a little while. Because where we're going, there is no sound but the drip of water and the quiet hum of something waiting in the dark. Tonight, we descend beneath the city, into the catacombs where the walls remember every name ever buried within them. Our story follows a gravedigger who sells oil to mourners and discovers his lantern never runs dry. Each drop that feeds its flame is not oil at all, but something the dead left behind. This is the lantern of the catacombs, a quiet horror to fall asleep to if you can. Before we go below, make sure you're comfortable. Dim the lights. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this one, subscribe and keep the lantern burning with us. The lantern was squat and battered, dented along its crown where the brass had been hammered straight with a roofing nail. It rattled faintly when shaken. Marceau kept it on the bench beside his cot, under the sacristy steps, where he lived among lime dust and candle soot. His room was little more than a corner. Bed, chair, ledger, flask. He oiled the lantern's hinge, wiped the glass, and watched its dull gleam under the single candle. The air smelled of mould and wax. Above, the church bell had already rung for Compline. He opened his ledger. His careful script filled the damp pages. 2 wicks to the stonecutters, 4 measures to the mason, half to the choirwoman for vigil. He wrote 1 more note along the margin, found flask as yesterday, then closed it. When he lifted the lantern, it felt heavy, too heavy. He hadn't refilled it since morning. He frowned, weighing it in his palm, then shrugged. The body played tricks in the dark. The foreman's voice came from the courtyard. "Marceau, if you mean to go down again, make it brief. Father wants the gate shut by Compline." "I'll be brief," Marceau said, and stepped outside. The foreman stood with his hands in his coat, jaw clenched as always. "Patch that hinge again," he muttered. "Last week. Then again." Marceau nodded. There was no winning an argument with the living or the dead. He descended into the stairwell, narrow as a throat, striking a match to light the wick. The lantern flared, breathing out a soft orange glow. Cold air rose from below, carrying the smell of damp limestone and burnt tallow. The catacombs stretched under the parish like veins, galleries stacked with femurs, niches walled with skulls, names chiselled and half erased. Marceau knew every bend. He could walk it blind, guided by air and sound, the scrape of his boots, the hush of dripping water, the distant echo of his own breath. He stopped where the stair opened into the main gallery. Rows of clay dishes lined the path, each holding a trembling candle. Far down, a woman sat wrapped in a shawl, hands folded, waiting. "You're late," she said. "I had notes to finish," he answered. She looked past him, uneasy. "I don't like being down here alone. The boys say rats." "Rats like company," he said. She didn't smile. "I'll need oil, 4 hours, maybe 5, and a new wick." Marceau pulled a corked phial from his belt and a fresh coil of wick. 2 measures. The wick's a gift. "I'll pay in the morning." "You'll forget in the morning, but keep it anyway." Her mouth softened. "You're kind." "Practical," he said. "Arguments cost more than oil." She nodded. "Jean?" "Marceau." He lifted the lantern in a small gesture of parting and moved on. He made his rounds through the galleries, trimming candles, cleaning channels cut into the floor to guide runoff. The air was cold enough to sting the teeth. When he stopped to check his lantern, the gauge nail he'd bent years ago showed the same mark as before. Full. He tilted it, listened for the thin slosh of oil, but heard something thicker. Perhaps his ears were tired. At the St. Matthew spur, 2 stonecutters lounged against the wall, boots off, socks steaming faintly. "Evening," said Eugène, the talkative one. "Any leaks in Saint Martin?" "Not tonight." "Credit for a flask?" "No credit," Marceau said. "The foreman says no one sleeps below after Compline." "We weren't sleeping," Eugène grinned. "Then you were practising," Marceau said. "Put your boots on before the rats practice too." The quiet one, Baptiste, obeyed immediately. Eugène nodded toward the dark ahead. "Why's your flame turn blue down there?" Marceau looked. The lantern's edge did flicker blue when tilted toward the Saint-Éloi spur. "The stones breathe there," he said. "They pull the air through cracks." "The stones breathe," Eugène repeated, pleased by the phrase. "Don't linger," Marceau said, and left them to their boots. He turned toward Saint-Éloi himself, unable to resist the thought. The spur had been sealed last spring after a collapse. Few went that way now. He counted his steps, 13 to the first arch, 12 to the second, and 12 again to the third, where the ceiling had caved and left a wall of rubble and bone. The air tasted metallic. He raised the lantern. Its flame leaned blue at the edges. The floor channel beneath him glistened faintly. He crouched, touched it, rubbed his fingers together. Grease, not water. He sniffed. Sweet and rancid, like butcher's fat left too long in sun. He took a small tin from his pocket and held it under the seam where wall met ceiling. Beads gathered, swelled and fell, thick amber drops that landed with soft taps. He caught a few, enough to shimmer at the bottom of the tin. He closed it, pocketed it, and straightened. His palm left a print on the wall, shining faintly even after he stepped back. He told himself it was candle soot mixed with moisture. The catacombs did strange things with air and light. He turned to leave. As he walked, the lantern felt heavier, not lighter. The flame burned clean, steady, blue at the tip. He tilted it again. The slosh was slow, viscous. He stopped hearing his own boots. Back near the vigil chamber, Jane sat watching her candle. "Does it burn well?" he asked. "It does," she said. "Better than the one from home. I'll add more soon. The dark down here feels alive." He nodded. "Trim your wick before you add oil." Her eyes flicked to his lantern. "Yours burns strange, blue at the heart." He turned it slightly. "Old lantern, knows its work." She didn't press him, but her gaze lingered on the glow as he walked away. He climbed back to the sacristy after the bells. The foreman waited at the top of the stairs. "Enough," he said. "Lock up. Father's finished prayers." Marceau nodded and went to his bench. The lantern's light filled the small room, painting the walls the colour of honey. He opened his ledger and wrote, "Eugène and Baptiste, no sale. Jean Renaud, 2 measures, wick free." When the foreman left, he sat a while in silence. The lantern burned beside him, bright as ever. He uncorked the reservoir, tilted it. Oil gleamed up to the thread, still full. He frowned. Hours of work below, yet not a drop gone. He reached into his pocket, drew the small tin and opened it. A sweet, heavy smell filled the air. The substance inside was thick and gold, like melted wax. He touched a finger to it, then to a candle flame. It caught instantly, burned clean, left no smoke. He stared at it, the way one stares at a fact that refuses to explain itself. He wrapped the tin in a rag and set it in the chest. Then came a knock at the door, soft, quick. John stood there, shawl clutched tight. "Forgive me," she said. The candle sputtered. It hissed and burned too fast. I think the dish was oily. "Trimmed the wick?" "Yes, it still spat like fat in a pan." He sighed and lifted his lantern. "Come, we'll look." They descended once more. The air was colder, the silence thicker. Jean's steps echoed softly behind him. As they neared the vigil chamber, the lantern's light shifted blue again, deep and steady. Her candle had burned itself nearly flat. The dish shimmered with a thin layer of oil. The smell was faintly sweet, faintly wrong. Marceau bent to wipe it clean. The rag came away greasy. "It isn't tallow," he said. Jean pointed at the wall. "Look." From the stone seam above the niche, a droplet formed, thick amber, and fell into the dish with a soft plop. Another followed, then another. "Water," she whispered. "No," Marceau said. He raised the lantern closer. The beads swelled, slid downward, and the flame leapt bright blue and sharp. The air warmed around them. The flame seemed to feed on the droplets themselves. Jean stepped back. "It's dripping from the wall." He nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the seam. The wall wept more freely now, streaking the stone in slow rivulets. The lantern's light pulsed, brighter each second, the blue deepening like a vein under skin. "Go upstairs," he said quietly. "What is it?" "Go." She hesitated, saw something in his face, and fled. Marceau stayed. He could hear the soft hiss where drops met flame. The lantern glowed like a living thing, its reservoir trembling. He turned the wick down, but the flame resisted, clinging, steady, defiant. He whispered to the empty corridor, "You've had enough." The walls answered with a sigh. Not echo, sound, a wet breath, drawn through stone. The droplets quivered, then stilled. He stood very still, listening to his own pulse. Then he blew the lantern out. The darkness came down like water. In that blind silence he could still smell the sweetness, fat and faintly human. He waited for the darkness to move, but it didn't. The stone held its breath. Finally he turned and climbed, one step at a time, hand grazing the wall for balance. At the top of the stairs he paused, touched the glass of the unlit lantern. It was warm, too warm for a light that was out. He looked down at his hand. The tips of his fingers shone faintly, slick with the same amber sheen that had fallen from the wall. When he reached his bench, he set the lantern down carefully, as if afraid to wake it. The glass caught the candlelight, throwing a faint blue shimmer across the room. He uncorked the reservoir one last time. The oil was full to the brim. He stared at it for a long while, then shut it tight. From below faintly came the drip of the catacombs, the slow weeping of the stone. He wrote one last note in his ledger. Lantern full, burned all night. Then he blew out the candle. The darkness smelled sweet. The foreman found Marceau at dawn, asleep on his bench, the lantern still warm beside him. "You were down too long," the man said, hanging his coat. "Father says the gate was locked after midnight." Marceau sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes. A mourner needed help. The candle guttered. The foreman grunted. "You're not a priest. Next time, leave her to the dark." He reached for the lantern, turned it once in his hands. "You didn't refill this?" "No." "Still full?" Marceau hesitated. "Yes. Then you've mixed your measures. Happens when you're tired." The foreman set it down. "Patch the hinge before you go below again, and mind your oil. Father says we're short." He left without waiting for an answer. Marceau watched the door close and turned the lantern toward the light. The brass gleamed faintly, as if it had been polished in the night. When he rubbed a thumb along its side, it came away slick. He wiped his hands, said nothing, and went above for bread and black coffee. By midday, the rain had stopped, but the church still smelled of it. Wet stone, incense, and the faint rot of wilted flowers. A funeral party stood near the nave, whispering. Marceau watched from the back, cap in hand, until the priest led them below. When the last mourner vanished down the stair, Marceau followed. The air grew cold and clean. He lit the lantern, and the flame rose quick, its centre blue. He passed through the main gallery, where the mourners left their candles among skulls. Their footsteps faded. Alone, he turned towards Saint-Éloi. The air shifted as he went deeper. The yellow glow of his lamp thinned to blue, then steadied again. He touched the wall. His fingers came away greasy. He rubbed the film between thumb and forefinger. It clung like wax. He took out a tin, held it under a seam in the stone. Drops gathered and fell, thick and slow. He sniffed them, sweet, faintly rancid. He struck a match. The bead caught fire, burning clean blue before vanishing. Marceau closed the tin and pocketed it. That evening he brought it to Roland, the parish clerk, who sat hunched over his desk among ledgers and inkpots. "From Saint-Éloi," Marceau said, setting the tin down. Roland opened it, sniffed. "Rendered fat. Happens in the old sections. Bodies leak through the stone." "It burns," Marceau said quietly. "All fat burns." Roland lit a scrap of paper, touched the flame to the tin. The drop caught instantly, burning blue-white. "Human tallow," Roland said, almost to himself, "seeps out when the walls are saturated." Marceau frowned. "The walls are bleeding?" "They're weeping," the clerk corrected, blowing the flame out. "Say nothing to father. He doesn't like talk of what the dead leave behind." Marceau nodded, pocketed the tin, and went back to his room. He sat beside the lantern, its light low, his ledger open but untouched. The oil inside glowed faintly even when he turned the wick down. He poured a drop from his flask onto a rag, sniffed. The smell was the same, sweet and sickly. He touched the rag to the flame. It burned too clean, too bright. He pinched it out and listened. The room was quiet, but for a sound beneath the floor, slow, deliberate dripping. Not water, too heavy. He knelt, pressing his ear to the flagstones. The sound deepened, a slow pulse, as if the stone itself had lungs. He whispered, "You're not supposed to breathe." The lantern's flame flickered blue, steadying again. He sat up, heart knocking once, then slowly easing. "I hear you," he said softly, though he didn't know why. The next morning, Jeanne waited in the courtyard, shawl drawn tight around her shoulders. "I shouldn't be here," she said, "but I dreamed my candle still burned. When I woke, my hands smelled like oil." "You left it in the crypt?" "Yes." "Then it wasn't a dream." She looked at him nervously. "You think something's wrong down there?" He gestured toward her shawl. "What's that?" A dark stain spread along the hem, translucent, greasy. "It appeared overnight," she said. "I thought rain." Marceau touched it. The smell rose, sweet, unmistakable. "Not rain, the walls." "Stone doesn't stain," she whispered. "Maybe something inside it does." She stared at him, frightened. "You look ill, Marceau." "I was listening to the floor," he said absently. Her mouth tightened. "You should see the priest. He blesses air, not stone." That evening, the foreman sent him below again to clear the drains before the rain returned. 2 stonecutters went with him, their lamps glowing dull yellow beside his blue. The lower channels shimmered black. When the men stepped in, the surface clung to their boots like syrup. "This isn't runoff," one muttered. Marceau crouched and dipped a rag. It came up shining. He wrung it out. The smell filled the tunnel, sweet, thick, wrong. "Don't touch it," said the other. "It's poison." Marceau held the rag near his lantern. The flame jumped higher, brighter. "It burns longer," he said. The men backed away. "Enough of that, gravedigger." He dropped the rag into the water. It hissed but didn't die. Tiny blue tongues rippled outward before vanishing. The men swore and ran for the stairs. Marceau watched until darkness returned. He turned toward the wall. Droplets formed again, slow and rhythmic. He whispered, "You feed each other." The flame pulsed once, almost nodding. He found Jean waiting on the steps as he rose from below. "Father says the smells reach the sacristy," she said. "They think it's oil from the stores." "It isn't. Then what?" "The walls are sweating it. The lantern drinks from them." She stepped back. "You sound mad." "Come see." "I won't." "Then take this." He offered her the tin. "If I don't come back, give it to Father." She didn't take it. "You've been too long underground." "Maybe," he said, "but I'm the only one who's listening." That night, he went down alone. The catacombs were silent, the air still as a held breath. When he reached Saint-Éloi, the collapsed wall glistened from end to end. The smell was stronger now, sweet, metallic, human. He set the lantern down and crouched. The weeping stone pulsed faintly, drops forming and sliding in rhythm. Each one that fell made the flame swell brighter. He whispered, "What are you?" The droplets quickened. The light grew. He twisted the wick lower. The flame resisted, leaning toward the wall like a plant to the sun. The glass fogged from within. Beads formed on the inside and ran down into the reservoir. He watched the level rise. "No," he breathed. He tried to blow it out. The flame flickered, then steadied. Heat rolled off it. The air smelled like seared meat. He seized his coat and threw it over the lantern. The cloth blackened but didn't smother the light. He kicked it aside. The lantern hit the floor and split open. Blue fire spilled across the stone, crawling along the cracks like spilled water. It spread to the walls, burning wherever the oil wept. Marceau staggered back. The flames climbed slowly, not wild but alive, feeding upward, whispering. The entire chamber glowed as if lit from within. He grabbed the handle of the broken lantern, too hot to hold, and fled. At the stairs he turned once. The flames were already dying, sinking back into the stone, leaving it wet and clean. He looked at the lantern. The cracked reservoir was full again, shining faintly blue. "You're alive," he said. The flame, faint in the fractured glass, flickered once in answer. Above ground, the church was dark. The rain returned. Jan stood under the archway, pale and shaking. "You're hurt," she said. "It's nothing." Her eyes went to the lantern. "Why did you bring it back?" "I couldn't leave it." "Then destroy it." He hesitated. "If I could." She stepped forward, voice trembling. "Please, it's not right." He held it out to her. "Then pour it out." She recoiled. "I can't touch that thing." "Someone must." "What's in it?" He stared into the flame. "All of them. Every one we buried." The wind rose outside, rattling the windows. He turned toward the sacristy door. "Stay here," he said. She didn't follow. Inside, he placed the lantern on the hearth beside the parish oil flask and struck a match. The normal oil burned orange, mild. He set the lantern beside it. Its blue glow bled into the orange, turning it white. He whispered, "You belong below." The lantern's light flared, and for a moment the whole room shone like midday. Then the blue sank into the brass again, leaving only smoke and the smell of wax. When he looked down, the lantern sat unburned in the ashes, full once more. Marceau stepped back, eyes wide. Outside, thunder rolled beneath the city, deep and steady as if the catacombs themselves were breathing again. The rain didn't stop for 3 days. It ran down the church walls and gathered in the catacomb drains until the sound of dripping became a second kind of breathing beneath the city. Marceau barely slept. Each night the sound rose through the flagstones under his bed, soft, steady, wet. When he pressed his ear to the floor, he could almost feel it pulse. The foreman caught him in the courtyard one morning, pale and distracted. "You're haunting yourself," he said. "Leave the tunnels. Father's sealing the lower levels until spring. They'll drown if we do that. They're dead, Marceau. They won't mind." Marceau said nothing. The foreman squinted at him. "If I find you below again, I'll nail the door shut behind you." He left. The rain thinned to mist. When the bell rang for Compline, Marceau took the lantern and went down anyway. The air in the stairwell felt heavier than before. The walls sweated. His boots splashed through shallow puddles. The lantern's flame rose clean and blue, brighter than usual, as if recognizing the path. He passed the vigil chamber where Jean had sat. The candles she'd left behind had drowned in wax. The smell of old fat and stone filled the passage. He touched a wall. It was warm. Stone should never feel warm. He crouched and held the lantern close. Beads of thick amber liquid formed along the mortar seams, trembling before falling into a small puddle on the floor. The puddle shimmered gold, not black. Marceau dipped a rag, wrung it out and touched it to the flame. It burned blue-white without smoke. He whispered, "How deep do you go?" The flame leaned towards Saint Eloi spur. The collapse had been cleared sometime during the rain. The tunnel beyond gaped open again, damp and silent. He walked in, keeping one hand to the wall. The air pressed close, warmer with every step. The lantern's glow tinted the stone cobalt blue. At the tunnel's end, Saint Eloi's carved relief stood glistening. The saint's chisel pointed toward a stone basin at his feet. It overflowed with oil so clear it reflected the lantern's flame perfectly. Marceau knelt. The smell rising from it was sweet and faintly metallic, like candle wax turned to sugar. His reflection warped across the surface. He dipped 2 fingers. The liquid clung to his skin like sap. When he pulled back, his fingertips shone. The warmth seeped into him, pulsing faintly with his own heartbeat. He whispered, "You're alive, aren't you?" The walls answered with a sound like a sigh. The lantern flared blue, bright, blinding. He stumbled backward, shielding his face. When he looked again, the oil in the basin rippled as though something beneath it had exhaled. He didn't tell anyone what he'd seen. But that night, the smell rose into the church. The choir fainted mid-hymn. Father doused candles, claiming mildew, but the odour only thickened, sweet, heavy, human. When the foreman came to Marceau's quarters, his eyes were red. Father's ordered the lower tunnels sealed. "Every last one. You'll keep your distance, or I'll have your pay docked." Marceau nodded, waited until the man left, and pried the nails from the gate before dawn. The catacombs breathed differently now. The air moved in long, slow draughts. The walls glistened in his lantern's glow, as though varnished. He passed the ossuary niches, the names worn flat on plaques. Water, or oil, trickled softly in the channels. He reached Saint Eloi. The basin was empty, but the air shimmered with heat. The stone face of the saint looked freshly carved. He lifted the lantern closer. Cracks ran through the chisel in the statue's hand. From those cracks, thin streams of liquid oozed down like tears. Marceau's stomach turned. The lantern's flame swelled brighter, as if feeding on the scent. He twisted the wick down. The light resisted. He blew on it. It only flared higher. Then the stone shifted. It wasn't sound, more like vibration through his boots. The cracks widened. The liquid poured freely now, coating the basin in a trembling film. The air rippled with a low hum, like breath behind a wall. "Stop," Marceau whispered. "Please." The weeping only quickened. He stepped backward. His heel struck the floor channel, thick with oil. It caught the light, and for an instant, blue ripples ran down the passage toward the main gallery. He panicked, grabbed the lantern, and stumbled after them. When he reached the gallery, the candles along the walls had already gone out. The dark ahead was moving. He froze. The faint blue shimmer flowed along the walls in veins, crawling toward the stairs. Each droplet that fell from the ceiling ignited for a moment before fading. The catacombs burned like a sleeping body glowing beneath its skin. He ran. His boots splashed through shallow pools that glowed underfoot. Each step left a print of light that slowly faded behind him. By the time he reached the stair, the glow had dimmed. The air cooled. The walls looked ordinary again. Only the smell remained. He locked himself in the sacristy and sat by the window until morning. The lantern burned beside him, steady, bright, the brass too hot to touch. When the foreman arrived, Marceau met him at the door. "You sealed the wrong gallery," he said. "What? The oil's moving. It isn't staying down there." The foreman sighed. You've lost sleep and sense both. Rest. Father says the smell will pass once the stone dries. It won't dry, Marceau said. It's alive. The foreman grabbed his collar. Enough. Don't spread your nonsense. I've got men refusing to go below already. He shoved Marceau back and stormed off. When the door shut, Marceau whispered, You'll see. Jean came that evening. She looked thinner, her shawl dark with damp. I heard shouting, she said. They think it's water. It's not. Her gaze fell to the lantern. You still carry it. It carries me now, he said quietly. It never goes out. She hesitated, then drew closer. Father sent word to bless the ossuary tomorrow. He says the air feels wrong. Marceau stared past her. It's not the air, it's what's in the walls. She touched his arm. Marceau, please, you're scaring me. I'm scared too. He looked at her, tired and calm. Promise me you won't come here tomorrow. Why? He didn't answer. That night he returned to Saint-Éloi with a plan, to drain the basin and see how deep it went. He brought a spade and a clay flask. The tunnels greeted him with silence. The lantern burned so bright it left no shadow. At the relief of Saint-Éloi, the basin shimmered again, full once more, though he had seen it empty the night before. He knelt, plunged the spade into the oil, expecting it to splash. It didn't. It parted like silk, soundless. He dug deeper. The spade met nothing, no floor, only endless liquid, viscous and warm. He pulled it out. Not a drop clung to the metal. The flame inside the lantern pulsed faster. He held it over the basin. The surface below mirrored the flame perfectly. For a moment he thought he saw not his own reflection, but another face, drawn thin, eyes hollow, mouth slightly open. The face blinked. Marceau dropped the lantern. It struck the rim, spilled fire, and rolled into the basin. The oil ignited without sound. Blue light bloomed up the wall, tracing the saint's outline until the entire relief burned like a figure made of glass. He stumbled backward, shielding his face. The heat seared his skin, but there was no smoke, no ash. When he dared to look again, the fire was gone. The basin was empty. The walls were dry. The lantern lay upright beside the stone, whole again, flame steady. Marceau reached for it, trembling. The handle was cold. He whispered, What are you? The flame tilted toward him, blue and calm, as if it understood the question, and pitied him. By morning the church smelled of wax and something sweeter. Father cancelled Mass. The foreman quit before noon. Jean found Marceau in the yard, sitting by the gate, lantern at his feet. Is it over? She asked. He didn't look up. It never ends, it only moves. She knelt beside him. What did you do? Buried the light, he said softly, but it won't stay buried. Her eyes followed his to the ground. Oil seeped up between the cobblestones, faint and clear, catching the weak sunlight like veins of glass. Jean's voice shook. It's here too. He nodded. She reached for the lantern. Let me take it. I'll bring it to the river. No, Marceau said sharply. If it leaves the tunnels, it will never stop burning. Then what will you do? He looked toward the stairway leading down. Go back. You'll die. I know. He lifted the lantern. Its flame shone bright in daylight, impossible and pure. Someone has to feed it, he said, or it will find its own. He walked toward the stair. Jean didn't follow. That evening she went to the sacristy to fetch her things. The door to the stair was open again. From below came the faint hum of air moving through narrow halls, and beneath it, the sound of quiet breathing. The lantern's blue light flickered in the darkness, deep beneath the church, steady as ever. By the time Jean returned at dawn, the courtyard was empty. The rain had stopped, but the cobblestones still gleamed with thin veins of oil. The church doors were locked from the inside. She called Marceau's name, softly at first, then louder. No answer. A faint smell drifted from the stairwell below the sacristy door, warm, sweet, unmistakable. She pressed her ear to the wood. There was a low hum beneath the floor, like wind inside a hollow tree. She backed away. Father Roux found her later, sitting on the church steps, pale as linen. You shouldn't be here, he said gently. This place is sick. Marceau's down there, Jean whispered. The priest frowned. He went below after I forbade it. The foreman said he took the lantern. He hasn't come back, Roux sighed. Then he's with God. But when he looked toward the catacomb stair, his eyes betrayed fear. That night, Roux gathered 3 men and a rope and went below. Jean followed despite his protests. The air was dry now, still as a sealed tomb. The candles they carried smoked black. Rue led with a crucifix. "Call out if you smell it," he said. They passed the first 2 galleries without sound. Then one of the men stopped. "Father," he said, voice trembling, "look." The walls ahead glistened faintly blue. Rue raised his candle. The light caught on the wet sheen. When he touched the wall with a gloved hand, the surface felt soft like leather warmed by breath. "Keep moving," he said quickly. At Saint Eloi arch, the glow deepened. The carved relief shimmered like something alive. Rue took a step forward and froze. Marceau was kneeling before the basin, still as a statue. The lantern burned at his feet, bright and clean, blue at its heart. "Marceau," Rue said softly. The man didn't move. "Get him up," Rue ordered. 2 men approached, but the first stopped short. "Father, he's wet." Jeanne stepped past them before anyone could stop her. She touched Marceau's shoulder. Her hand came away shining. "Marceau," she whispered. He turned his head slowly, as if hearing her from far away. His face glistened with a thin film of oil that caught the lantern light like glass. His eyes were unfocused, pupils wide. "Jean," he murmured, voice dry as dust, "you shouldn't have come." She crouched beside him. "What have you done?" He looked at the basin. "It won't let me stop." Rue stepped forward, raising the crucifix. "In the name of Christ, leave this place." Marceau smiled faintly. "It's older than Christ." The priest's voice faltered. "What do you mean?" Marceau reached for the lantern. "Listen." He tilted it. The flame wavered, but did not dim. From deep within the walls came a sound, a slow, heavy heartbeat muffled by stone. Jean staggered back. Rue made the sign of the cross. "We go, now." But Marceau rose to his feet, the lantern in hand. The blue light reflected in his eyes. "You can't leave," he said quietly. "It's waking." They fled. Jean didn't remember how they climbed the stairs or when the priest began shouting prayers. She only remembered the sound behind them, thick, steady dripping, following. When they reached the courtyard, Rue barred the door and dropped to his knees. "Lord preserve us," he whispered. One of the men was missing. No one spoke his name. The church remained closed for 2 days. Rue refused to enter the sacristy, but the smell did not fade. Oil seeped from the cracks in the floor tiles. It ran in threads toward the altar and pooled beneath the steps. By the 3rd night, the candles would not stay lit. Their flames guttered and died, one by one, until only the blue lantern light glowed through the cracks of the stair door. Jean could not stay away. She went to the priest's quarters and found Rue at his desk, writing in the parish ledger. His hands shook. "You've seen it," she said. He looked up, eyes red. "There's oil in the holy water font. When I touched it, it burned my skin." "What are you writing?" "Names," he said quietly. "Everyone buried under this parish. Everyone we took payment for." She stepped closer. The page was covered edge to edge, rows of names, dates, and a final column with small marks that looked like tally strokes. "Why?" He didn't answer at first. When the catacombs were built, the stone was new. It took the shape of what we buried in it. That's why the walls breathe. The oil comes from them. Jean's mouth went dry. "You mean, the dead feed the flame," Rue said, "and we've been burning them for years." She stared at him. "You knew? Not until now." He closed the ledger slowly. Marceau was only the first to listen. A knock came from below, the hollow, deliberate knock of metal against stone. John froze. "That's him." Rue gripped the crucifix. "Stay here." He took a candle and went to the sacristy. The door to the stair was slick. When he touched the handle, it came away oily. He turned the key. The smell rolled out like heat. Jean waited. Minutes passed. The candlelight never returned. She crept to the doorway and looked down. The stair was lit faintly blue from below. The sound of dripping was steady again. "Father?" Her voice vanished into the dark. Then faintly, "Jean." She descended 1 step, then another. The air thickened around her. "Father?" she called again. No answer, only the hum of stone. At the base of the stair, the gallery opened into dim light. Rue knelt before the arch of Saint Eloi. The lantern burned beside him. Marceau stood behind him, calm, silent, one hand resting on the priest's shoulder. Jean froze. "Marceau," he looked up, eyes luminous in the blue light. "You see now," he said. "It isn't hell down here. It's memory." "What have you done to him?" "Nothing," Marceau said. "He's writing still, even now." Jean looked at Rue's hands. They moved faintly, tracing shapes on the stone floor with trembling fingers. Oil gleamed under his nails. "Stop," she whispered. "I can't," Marceau said. "The walls are full. They need to be recorded, every life, every drop. He lifted the lantern. It writes in light. The flame pulsed once, bright enough to blind her. When Jeanne woke, she was lying on the church steps. The sun was rising. The door to the sacristy hung open, smoke curling from the hinges. She crawled inside. The stair was gone, buried under a collapse of stone and charred beams. No oil, no sound. She stood trembling and saw the parish ledger open on the priest's desk. The last page glistened faintly, still wet. Her name was written there, neat and recent. She stared at it until the ink began to bead. The droplets were not ink at all, but oil, thick, amber, seeping from the page. That night, she took the ledger and walked to the edge of the city. The river was swollen and black. She threw the book in. It sank without sound. But when she turned to leave, she saw ripples of blue spreading across the water's surface, faint and slow, drifting downstream. The next morning, the townsfolk found the church empty. The altar steps shone with a thin film that smelled faintly of tallow. The sacristy door was sealed again, but from the other side. And beneath the floorboards, if one pressed an ear close enough, there was still that quiet hum, steady, patient, alive. For 3 days the church remained closed. No bells, no sermons, only the steady rain tapping the roof and the faint, sweet smell of oil that refused to fade. Jean returned on the 4th morning. The foreman was gone. The priest's quarters were locked. Yet from beneath the sacristy door came a low hum, like a voice heard through water. She pressed her palm to the wood. It was warm. That evening she returned with a key and a small lamp of her own. The courtyard was deserted, the air heavy with thunder. The lock turned easily, as if waiting. Inside, the nave was stripped bare. Candles lay melted on the floor. Their wax ran into the joints of the stone like pale veins. The smell of tallow thickened as she neared the sacristy. The stair had been sealed with planks after the collapse. The boards were nailed hastily, crooked. Through the gaps, faint blue light flickered below. Jean set down her lamp, took a hammer from her satchel, and began to pry the boards loose. It took nearly an hour. The wood came away slick. Beneath, the air that rose was not cold. It was warm and sweet, like kitchens before a feast. She hesitated only once before stepping through. The catacombs had changed. The air was dry, but it trembled faintly, as though the stone itself breathed. Her lamp's orange light seemed weak against the walls, which shone faintly blue, catching the glow and bending it back. She moved slowly, touching the walls as she went. They were warm beneath her fingers. At the first bend, she found the vigil bench where she had once prayed. A dark ring stained the wall behind it, almost invisible but for the sheen. She knelt and pressed her fingers to it. The warmth pulsed faintly. Then came a sound from deeper in the tunnels, steady, deliberate, metal tapping stone. She took up the lamp and followed. At the far end, where Saint Eloi relief had once stood sealed, she found the source. Marceau knelt beside the basin. The lantern burned at his side, flame blue as the heart of a forge. His face shone with a faint oily film, eyes distant but calm. She whispered, "Marceau." He turned. "You shouldn't have come. You said that before." He smiled slightly. "Then you remember." "What are you doing?" "Writing," he said simply. She saw the slate at his knee, marked with rows of names, hundreds of them, carved into the surface by the lantern's light. The letters glistened, not with chalk, but with a thin sheen of oil. Jean's throat tightened. "You're copying the ledger." "I'm correcting it." He lifted the lantern. The blue deepened. The stone beneath their feet shuddered faintly. "What does that mean?" she asked. Marceau spoke softly, as though teaching a child. "Every body that was buried here left its trace. The stone took their weight, their warmth, their shape. After a while it began to remember. That's what we burn, Jeanne. Not oil, memory." She took a step back. "You're mad." "I was," he said. "But the walls told me the truth. They only want their accounts balanced." She looked at the slate again. Each name was followed by a mark, some crossed out, others circled. "Balanced how?" "Each flame we lit for the dead took from the living," he said. "We used their oil. We fed their light. The stone has been keeping record. Now it wants what's owed." Jean stared at him, horrified. "You mean," he nodded, "it burns the ones who remember, the ones who still owe prayers, the rest, it leaves." "You can't believe that." "I don't believe," he said. "I've seen." The floor beneath the basin rippled faintly. Oil welled from the cracks and gathered around the stone base. The air shimmered with heat. Marceau didn't move. "It's waking," he said. "It knows you're here." "Then come away," she said. "We'll seal it again. We'll tell the priest." He shook his head. "There is no priest now. The oil took him first. He tried to bless it." Jean backed toward the tunnel. "Then I'll burn it out." Marceau smiled faintly. "You can't burn something made of burning." The lantern's light grew brighter, so bright she had to shield her eyes. From the cracks in the wall, droplets began to form again, slow, steady, endless. Each one that fell into the basin made the flame pulse stronger. Jean's voice shook. "What happens if it's not fed?" Marceau looked at her. "Then it takes." The ground trembled, the air thickened until every breath tasted of wax. The lantern hummed in Marceau's hands, its brass vibrating like a struck bell. She reached for it. "Give it to me. You'll die if you touch it. Then so will you." He hesitated, then smiled, tired, almost relieved. "That's the point." Jean lunged forward. The lantern tipped. Blue light spilled across the basin, flooding it in one long breath of fire. The oil ignited without sound. Flames raced up the walls, tracing every crack like veins. The carved saint's face lit from within, its stone mouth opening in a silent scream. Jean fell backward. Heat surged against her skin. She saw Marceau still kneeling, hands clasped around the lantern as if in prayer. The flames rose higher, but he didn't move. She crawled toward the stairs, smoke filling her lungs. Behind her, the light deepened from blue to white, and the sound grew, a low, rolling breath that filled the catacombs from floor to ceiling. She reached the stair and climbed. Each rung burned against her hands, but she didn't stop until she burst through the broken doorway into the sacristy. The church was burning quietly. Not with orange fire, but with light, cold, blue, seeping through every crack in the stone. Jean stumbled through the nave. The altar gleamed wet. Oil streamed down its steps in thin, shining rivers. Beneath the pews, the flagstones swelled and darkened, as if something beneath them was trying to rise. She threw open the doors. Rain poured in. The light recoiled slightly, but did not die. Then the floor beneath her groaned. A deep, slow sigh filled the space, the sound of the catacombs breathing through their broken skin. She turned back once and saw it, the lantern sitting on the altar, flame steady, blue and calm. It hadn't followed her. It had chosen its place. By morning the rain had stopped. The church still stood, though no one dared enter. From the street, people said they saw a faint glow through the windows, like moonlight caught in glass. Others swore they heard the sound of a man whispering prayers deep underground. No one found Jean. When the bishop's men finally came to investigate, they broke open the sacristy door and found the nave dry, the altar clean, and a single lantern sitting where the chalice should have been. The flame still burned. They poured water on it. It hissed, turned pale, and burned brighter. They sealed the church again, posting guards at the doors. But at night, when the air was still, the guards heard faint dripping beneath the stones, and sometimes, if they leaned close enough to the door, a single soft breath. Weeks passed. The townspeople spoke less of the church, but they began noticing other things. Oil streaking the walls of the cryptyard, blue-tinted lamps flickering in the rain, a sweetness in the air that clung to skin, and always that faint glow in the distance, never brighter, never gone. One evening, an old woman came to the bishop's hall carrying a parcel wrapped in cloth. She said nothing until she was inside. Then she placed it on the table. When the bishop unwrapped it, he found a ledger, old, damp, and faintly warm to the touch. The last page was blank, save for a single drop of clear oil pressed into the centre. Beneath it, faintly etched, was a name: Jean Renaud. Outside, the wind picked up. The lamps in the street burned pale blue for just a moment, then steadied again. And far beneath the city, deep in the sealed catacombs, something exhaled, a long, patient sigh that smelled faintly of oil and remembered names. The sound rose through the stone like a whisper, passed through the walls of the church, and lingered in the night air until it was mistaken for wind. You've been listening to The Lantern of the Catacombs. The church is sealed now, its doors locked, and the lantern still burning somewhere far below. But if you listen closely, you might still hear it. The faint drip of oil on stone, the slow breath of something that remembers every name it ever burned for. If the story stayed with you, let it. And if you'd like to wander deeper into the dark with me, subscribe. There are more stories waiting below. Some are older, some are closer than you think. Sleep well, and keep the lantern burning.